right. So that's like my 100th trip around the block with this thing, but the most positive one yet. See, getting this thing running right has been a lot more than I anticipated. But if you remember, the last time you saw this thing on camera, I had a hard time even getting it to start consistently. So we're celebrating the small victories right now. So yeah, we're going to take an opportunity in this episode to show you what we've done so far to get to this point and lay out a little game plan on where to go from here. All right? All right, so as some of you know, when I picked up this Montero, it came with a 2.6 liter G54B. That's a Starion motor from the old Mitsubishi Starion. That motor is basically the precursor to the 1G DSM motor that was basically a darling of the 90s in terms of tuning culture back then. Came in the Eclipse and whatnot. But when I say it's swapped, it basically just came in the truck, okay? The previous owner did a pretty good job of getting this thing in here, wiring it up crudely with electrical tape and some butt connectors. But, you know, as you know, when buying a project car, the first order of business is making sure that everything was done to considerable spec, that it's going to safely operate. And then from there, it's up to you to shake out all the gremlins. So that's kind of where we've been at, shaking out a lot of gremlins. All right, so after a little tune-up, changing the plugs, adjusting the timing, cleaning the tank, chasing my way through a few wiring inconsistencies and troubleshooting from there, I was able to get the truck to start consistently, but I couldn't get the thing to fucking stay running. So, the first order of business to be able to start tuning this thing was to remedy the fact that the truck also didn't come with an exhaust. So I needed to plump a system that would quiet this thing down so I could actually work on it. And that took some time, being as that everything had to be cut and routed from scratch. However, a perk of the 2-inch body lift on this truck is that it gave me some added clearance for a 2.5-inch exhaust. And I'd say it came out pretty good. The MagnaFlow muffler out in the back quiets down a lot. But maybe we'll add a resonator on later. I don't know, we'll see. All right, so if you own a Starion yourself, this is probably a part of your engine bay that you are very familiar with. This is going to be where all your problems live. Basically, once I got this thing tuned up and had the exhaust on, and I was able to get this thing running, I found that it was running pig rich. So bad that when the car would idle for about 5 minutes, it would richen up so much that it would die. It would flood the engine, and it wouldn't turn over again. And it was so bad that it actually contaminated my oil, and I had to flush all that oil out because you don't want that in your crankcase. So something needs to be fixed, or some things need to be fixed, or fucking everything needs to be fixed. All right, so the first thing we had to replace were some leaking stock injectors. As it turns out, when this thing was running, gas was getting past these injectors by a lot. And when you would turn the car off, gas that was pressurized in the fuel rail was seeping past the injectors and flooding the engine even when the car was off. So it would idle for 5 minutes, I would cut the engine, I would go back to start the car up a half hour later, and it didn't want to fire. I pulled these out, and I got in touch with South Bay Fuel Injectors out in Long Island. Local shop, they do great work. They make parts for Starions. They were able to have me a new set of injectors within a couple of days. Well, hey, I thought this motor's a 4-cylinder. Why are you only talking about 2 injectors? Well, the Starion is a TBI injected motor, okay? You're probably familiar with multi-port injection and direct port injection, that there's a fuel injector for every cylinder, okay? TBI setups like this, they run on a primary and secondary injector before the throttle body, okay? Your primary injector takes care of your basic fuel curve for idle and low RPMs. And then when you're higher in the range or on the boost or revving out higher RPMs, the secondary injector kicks on and gives you more fuel. So yeah, South Bay hooked it up, and I got some brand new injectors in here, 650, 950 setup, and that remedied my problem with the fuel leak by. Next problem I had to remedy was my fuel pressure. Stock setups call for about 38 to 40 pounds of pressure, depending on how you're tuning a Starion motor like this, okay? I was getting pretty close to like 55, 60. And that was a pretty good indicator that my stock fuel pressure regulator was not functioning properly. This old piece of shit. And finding a stock pull-off regulator isn't a guaranteed fix. That part could be failing or broken itself already. Thankfully, I was able to contact Trilogy Turbos down in Florida. They make bolt-on adjustable fuel pressure regulators for the Starion. So now that the fuel pressure regulator's in, I was able to scale back the pressure to where it needed to be. Okay, and I wasn't running the risk of damaging these new injectors, and I was actually able to get the car to start leaning out to where it needed to be, to the point where it actually runs now, like can drive. But it's not exactly where it needs to be, and it's still running a bit rich, and that brings us to our next set of issues. All right, so this cheap multimeter right here, this is basically my standalone tuner for this car right now. If you have any experience working with an OBD-I car, you'll understand that a multimeter is the only way you're going to be able to chase down your engine codes. All of the sensors on an OBD-I system run off of ohm resistances and voltage readings that, in dialogue with one another, tell the computer that things are operating correctly or incorrectly. OBD-II tuning is pretty intuitive. You pull a specific code that relates to a specific sensor in a specific area of the car, you're able to go and narrow in specifically on that spot to fix. It's not that easy with OBD-I. It's actually a fucking pain in the ass. All right, so this thing is still running pretty rich, and we want to scale that back and dial that in a little more. And the first thing we're going to do with our trusty multimeter here is dial in our throttle position sensor. It's funny, this truck actually didn't come with a throttle position sensor. And on these Starions, it's hard to find these parts. I owe a big thank you to Conquest Keith up in New Hampshire for sending me one. And now that I have it, well, we're going to walk you through the process and show you just what it is to tune on an OBD-I computer.
If you put out signals that you don't want to belong, people are going to make sure that you don't.
The way I see it, it's exactly the same. There ain't no difference between a flying saucer and a time machine. People get so hung up on specifics.
Okay, so first thing you have to do to perform this whole TPS procedure is make sure that the car is at full operating temperature. Your temperature sensors are going to yield specific readings that have an effect on how the sensors in this procedure are going to read as well. Once you're certain that your motor is warmed up fully, you're going to disconnect the throttle cable and make sure it's totally slack. Then, using your multimeter, you're going to go back in and make sure that the MPS sensor is reading at 0.9 volts at idle. If not, you go over and adjust your idle control screw slightly until you arrive at that reading. The service manual says to use a hexagonal wrench here, but my screw is either totally rounded out or aftermarket. I'm not sure.
Hey, where do you guys think you're going? Can't go, man.
Gotta go. But if you ever need us, just whistle loud.
Anyhow, the next step involves disconnecting the ISC sensor and finding the touch point on your fixed SAS screw right above the throttle plate. Again, you do this with the car running. At this point, you move on to your TPS sensor, where you're going to start looking for your next set of voltage readings with the ignition in the on position. But that's without the engine running this time. This is the actual step in the sequence that matters most. After calibrating all these other parts, you finally move on to the actual part you're trying to calibrate. And again, getting a clear reading is going to be tricky as you're trying to finagle your multimeter pins into the sensor. You'll be holding the sensor, keeping the multimeter in position, trying to adjust the sensor. You're going to try to maintain balance on your feet. if you were born with 3 or 4 hands, this tends to make the job a lot easier. Sadly, I only came stock with 2. And then shit like that happens. And you break the harness end of your TPS sensor. And you can't get the reading you need. And you can't dial in your air-fuel curve. And you gotta add another list to the problems. And until we're able to sort that out, this is where we're gonna have to leave you. A few steps forward, another step back. Fucking Starion-Swapped Montero.